Why do people think this is so powerful?
I don't think it's particularly powerful. I think it has opportunities to do cool things.
Yeah.
And the doing cool things tends to equate to powerful, right? If you can frame an NPC for murder because you blew up a room and they were the only spellcaster in it, that
Yeah.
is kind of powerful potentially, right? It's just going to vary by situation and all that kind of stuff.
Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we're going to go over Sam's picks for the best meta magic options. We'll be going from worst to best. We'll get to best eventually. Sam?
Oh, right now? Yeah, sure. I thought we were ranking these with a S tier, F tier kind of thing. No, sure. We can
Oh,
just
no,
talk through it.
no, no. Yeah, I guess we could have done it that way, but
Yeah, this works.
I didn't prepare little tiles for it. So
Unlucky. Yeah, so there are 10 mathematic options that exist currently. Two of them are from the Touch Cauldron of Everything, I believe, right? Yeah, Touch Cauldron of Everything. And the other 8 are from the Player's Handbook. The total list is Careful Spell, Distance Spell, Empowered Spell, Extend Spell, Heightened Spell, Quicken Spell, Subtle Spell, Twinned Spell, and then from Tasha's is Seeking and Transmuted Spell. This list is in no way, shape, or form to say, like, you shouldn't ever take the worst, nor should you only ever take the best. There'll be some character trees that physically can't use the best of Metamagic here, and there will be some that really, really want like the second or worst one of these for one reason or another. This is just generally my ideas and my thoughts on how many character trees on average can benefit majorly from having them on their sheet, plus like how many would I consider shaving my entire character sheet around. So that's sort of where I'm at in my ranking process. The number ones, number 2, 3, the top end stuff is things, build your character around it. You can put them on a million character sheets. They're going to be effective and powerful. And the low end is like, these are kind of niche. They're not going to be that great on most characters. You have to really jump through some hoops to make these do anything.
none of them are keen mind, though.
One of them is close. But yeah, I don't think any of these are like unusable F tier garbage. I do think all of these have a place in the game at least.
All right, well, let's begin, shall we?
All right, starting at the bottom now we hear. This is number 10. This is printed in Touch Cauldron and everything, like I said earlier. This is Transmuted Spell. Transmuted Spell says, when you cast a spell that deals a type of damage from the following list, you can spend a sorcery point to change the damage type to other on the list. And then it's the acid, fire, cold, lightning, poison, and thunder damage. So if you do a fireball, you can make an acid ball if you really want to for a sorcery point.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on Transmuted Spell before I dive in?
All right. Well, we've been around the block a few times, talking about there's perhaps compared to editions past, fifth edition doesn't seem to have too many monsters with vulnerabilities. But yeah, and I guess there are more with
Resistance and immunity.
resistances or immunities, and this is a way to get around that. But yeah, if this is your worst, I mean, yeah, it's maybe deserving of, but I wouldn't call it keen mind levels of unusable.
I think that the real issue that I have with Transmuted Spell is that, like Chromatic Orb, it kind of says it's solving a problem, and that problem being overcoming immunities and resistances and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I just don't think in reality it does do that whenever you just have more than one damaging spell on your
Yeah.
character sheet, right? If you have a spell that is fire, a spell that is cold, and a spell that does acid damage, you don't necessarily need Transmuted Spell to change any one to the other to overcome any one of those resistances, right? And it doesn't turn the damage to force, it doesn't turn the damage into blood and slashing piercing, so it's still going to be resisted by things that resist all these kinds of damage types, which is
Or
usually the resistance to one or two, or all of them.
or
So that gets
radiant
into
or necrotic, which are big ones.
yeah. So like the list here is relatively narrow even whenever you're looking at like overcoming resistances and stuff, or not really overcoming resistances, but more so targeting vulnerabilities. Ultimately, I'm left with this as a thing I would take if I want a character that wants a spell to do a different damage type for cosmetic reasons. And I would hate to have to do this. This would be I'd ask my DM, hey, do you mind if I shift this damage spell because I want to go in on some kind of ice wizard or ice sorceress, more specifically, sorry. And they go, no, I'd rather you just stick with the rules as written. Then I go, okay, I guess I have to take Transmuted Spell to make this happen the way I want. I wouldn't want to have to do that. I don't think it is servicing you. I don't think it's going to, in the average game, change any of your spellcasting decisions for the most part.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, yeah. All right. I've got an ice spell. I've got a fire spell. I've got an acid spell. But my ice spell does a lot more than my available acid or fire spells. In that case, would this not be beneficial?
So technically it could be, in the instance where you're against something that has that resistance. In that instance, also, I want to ask, is transmuting that spell better than twinning, quickening, doing other metamagic effects on the other 2 damage type spells, right? What are we losing to take Transmuted Spell? And the reality is we're losing another metamagic option, right? That's the word has escaped me. The
Opportunity cost.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Thank you, Bob. That is the opportunity cost that we're making to take Transmuted Spell, which makes it notably worse. Like, it's harmless, but that means it isn't stacking up against the other things effectively. This is ineffective most of the time. Most of the other spells or rankings I have above this are effective more often of the time.
All right. So, all right. Before we move on, give me a brief rundown. All right. How does Metamagic work for sorcerers? You get a limited number of these.
Yes. So at 3rd level, you get 2 metamagic options that you can pick from the list of 10. Then you get an extra one at levels 10 and 17. So in total, you're going to end with 4 of these 10 on your character sheet.
Yes.
What 4 you pick are very important. And because you're a sorcerer that get very few known spells, usually what 4 you pick are going to sculpt what spells you want to take, because you'll want them to work with the metamagic option that you've selected or plan to select. So something like Careful or Transmute Spell, like, it technically works with every damage spell. I don't know if I really care all that much about it. Maybe I take it like 3rd if I don't want any of the other options, and it will work with all the stuff I've already taken, but like I don't see it being something I'm considering almost ever.
All right, I got one more question about this. Are there any maybe subclass features or anything that gives you, like, this happens when you use a cold damage spell?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Okay.
In those instances, I think it could be slightly more interesting. So Transmute Spell lets you change the damage type to Thunder or Lightning, and both those play well with Tempest Domain as an example. Tempest Domain can maximize Lightning or Thunder damage. So if you're doing some kind of, hybrid build where you're doing 2 levels of Cleric to get Tempest Domains, maximizing damage features, and then the rest in Sorcerer, like Storm Sorcerer or something, you could do some cool things with Transmute Spell if you specifically wanted to find non-lightning and thunder damage spells to have them do those damage types. You could also just cast Lightning Bolt because you're still a sorcerer. So like you can make that build without needing Transmuted Spell, but you could use Transmuted Spell if you have specific spells you want to augment into a damage type to work with subclass features, which there are a few of. Which still think earns this is a number 10 spot. I don't think the vast majority of sorcerers are that case.
All right, that's fine. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, it's a relevant.
I want to contribute.
You are contributing.
Yeah.
Number 9. Careful Spell. So Careful Spell says, when you cast a spell that forces other creatures to make a saving throw, you can protect some of those creatures from the spell's full force. To do so, you spend 1 sorcery point and choose a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier. A chosen creature automatically succeeds in the saving throw against the spell.
I was surprised to see this one as far down on the list.
I think Careful Spell's trash.
Okay.
Why do you like this then? Why do you think this should have a higher slot?
I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of area of effect spells that, if everybody's in a rumble together, you want your friends to make the saving throw, or you'll feel bad about burning them.
So the instance that you're painting the picture of is there's a fireball, right? You're putting a fireball in the middle of the room. It's going to do a bunch of damage to people.
Yeah.
I don't really care because I'm still always doing half damage to my friends anyway, so it's still net negative for me to do that. I am much more incentivized to put this in a location that hits only the enemies. And when playing and DMing for a very long time, you'll notice it isn't hard to sculpt teammates out of this. Again, a lot of how encounters tend to look is you get like this wall, right? You have the player party that hits the enemy party, and then that forms some kind of barrier where the 2 sides meet. You don't often have 4 gremlins are intermingled between the 6 players in this scuffled brawl kind of encounter. You might have a couple things flanking, you might have a couple things off to the side, but spacing-wise, it isn't often going to be the case that you would have a big area of effect spell that is going to hit your allies, that you would want it to have that area so it hits more enemies.
All right, that has not been the case in games I've played recently. There's been a lot of, friendly fireballs. But before we move on with that, I want to ask, now you said I'm always going to be doing half damage to my allies anyway.
Yeah,
Why is that?
because
Why?
they only pass the save. They're not sculpted out of the spell. They just succeed on the
Oh,
saving throw.
oh, all right. I thought you meant, that was going to happen anyway, whether or not you used this.
Agnostic, here's the other pain point that I have for this that you just
Yes.
alluded to. If you cast the fireball
Yes.
and it hits the rogue, you can say, well, I'll set the sorcerer's point, the rogue will automatically pass the saving throw. That outcome still could have occurred without you having to spend a sorcery point. So there is a
Sure.
real chance that this just doesn't do anything. A lot of the time, the rogue will just make the save, pass it, and take no damage because of evasion. If they fail it, they can take half damage because of evasion. They, make the deck save. They're sad. They take some damage. But the opportunity cost of having this on your sheet is in the situations where I'm fireballing and I want to include the rogue, I can offer the opportunity to automatically pass the save that they could have passed anyway. I don't love that. Now, I think this becomes a lot more interesting whenever you compare it use it with spells like Fear, whenever you use it with spells like
Yeah.
Hypnotic Pattern, whenever you use it with area of effect saves that do nothing on failed saves, giving your allies the ability to auto pass spells that have no negative effects on a successful save is meaningful if you want to hit giant areas. I think, again, Fear is kind of the poster child that I would point to. If you're doing a lot of those kinds of big area effect stunning effects, and you want to be able to say, I need this cone to hit everybody, that's going to have to include my front line. Careful Spell can be one sorcerer point, they all automatically pass, and the Fear works on just the enemies. And that's kind of cool. Damage spells, I think this is quite bad. And even in the instances where you're doing things like Fear, movement is a real option at your disposal, so you can pretty comfortably sculpt this a lot of the time. I don't think most character sheets need this. I don't think the benefits are particularly powerful, but there will be instances with some spells in some encounters where you might save an ally or two from pretty debilitating effects. So that's something.
Yeah. Or if you just really like throwing out fireballs willy-nilly, regardless of who's standing there.
Yeah, I just have such a hard time seeing real encounters where your fireball isn't sculpted to hit exactly the most enemies possible without hitting players. I don't see that happening all that often.
Goblins have taken over the orphanage.
Uh-huh.
They're holding all the little orphans hostage.
Sure.
Fireball.
Then all the orphans are still dead. This didn't save the orphans. This didn't save the building.
They're really tough orphans.
They're really. Then they're like, it's okay, boss. We only
it's a
want to take
hard
half
knock
damage
life,
here.
Sam.
Sure. Yeah, I think Careful Spell is pretty bad, but there again, like you started with this floor is pretty high. This isn't I talk about it like it was the worst thing ever. You can make this work for some characters.
All right, where are we going from here?
Extended Spell number 8. So
Right,
Extended Spell.
No, all right, no, I was thinking Distance Spell, but Distance Spell you ranked even better, which I thought that would have been number 10 for you.
No,
because of how little you value distance.
We'll touch on it when we get there.
Yeah. All right, Extended Spell.
Okay, so Extended Spell says when you cast a spell that has a duration of a minute or longer, you can spend a sorcery point to double it to up 24 hours. The reality of most spells is you don't care about the duration. The duration normally is good enough. So if you got a minute spell, you don't really care if it goes to 2 minutes. If you got an hour spell, you don't necessarily care if it goes to 2 hours. I will say that specific window, that's where I think it's probably happiest. 10 minutes to an hour, that range is the one most often I would see there being real reason to double it and see value out of that. Going from a 10-minute concentration, 20-minute concentration might go from 2 encounters to a 3rd encounter. Doing an hour to 2 hours might go from the first half of this dungeon to the entirety of the dungeon. That's a real use case that I could see Extended Spell having, but that is entirely up to your DM if that is what is occurring or not, because your DM basically is the timekeeper of the game.
1 minute to 2 minutes is a fight, and then a minute extra of being useless.
Yeah, which is not useful.
No.
Especially whenever a lot of them are concentration effects that are probably going to get broken in that fight anyway. There's also another use case for this, that is to say, if there are any spells that have 8-hour durations, doubling it to 16-hour durations means you can long rest after you cast it, use the sorcery points, double the effect, and then have that effect banked for the next time around. So like an example could be with Mage Armor. Pretty sure Mage Armor has an 8-hour duration.
Yes.
And
it
if you double that, it goes to 16 hours. You can take the long rest, get your spell slot back and sorcery point back, and then have 8 hours of Mage Armor still up. That is a real way to save sorcery or save spell slots. And a lot of sorcerers will want some sorcery points devoted or some spell slots devoted to a decent AC. So I think that use case alone bumps this up quite a bit more for me, in that you can kind of cheese the long rest system with long duration spells, even if there are only a couple or a few amount of them. It's still a powerful enough effect that I think enough characters could benefit from, that it ekes it out over Careful and Transmuted Spell to me.
All right, that's fair enough.
Any other thoughts about Extended Spell?
No, I mean, pretty much covered. All I had to say was like, minute, not worth it, usually. And then what you said, 10 minutes could get you through another fight, whereas, an hour to 2 hours could yeah, it depends on how many fights you're looking at. If you're doing a dungeon crawl, then yeah, that could be really valuable.
It could, and again, it's also how long does your DM say things take, because that will vary wildly table to table. Number 7. This is where Distance Spell lands. Don't worry, you weren't far off. Distance Spell reads: when you cast a spell that has a range of 5 feet or greater, you can spend a sorcery point to double the range of that spell. When you cast a spell that has a range of touch, you can spend a sorcery point to make the spell's range 30 feet.
Oh. All right.
That's why it's number 7.
Touch. That what do you think? Does that make Vampiric Touch useful?
No, because I don't think it works with Vampiric Touch. I think Vampiric Touch is raid itself, I think.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Just keeps getting worse and worse. I think we've actually said that before.
Yeah, I need to do a ranking of all the range of touch spells in this game at some point in my life, just so I can reference it, because familiars and this both care about that a lot. And what touch spells exist, obviously matter quite a bit. So I will say that, like, most of the time, if you're doubling a 60-foot range, you're doing it because you need to. And having a metamagic sheet that you can do because you need to is beneficial, right? Like, to say that you could immediately, if you're 90 feet away from something and you can't quite move within 30 feet of it, being able to move within 60 feet of it and double the spell range to get you there is important in some fights. Not all fights, but some fights. I would more likely want this on my sheet in the instance where I'm regularly expanding touch range to 30 feet, or even like 30 feet to 60 feet in a lot of very open encounters. That's where I would start to want Distance Spell. I think once you hit 120 feet, you're just in ghoulish overkill territory, and you do not need to double 60 feet to 120. I don't think you need to double 120 to 240 or 240 to 480. Like, there isn't a realistic use case for getting super duper long range spells. But any of the short range stuff that you're going from, again, 30 to 60 or 5 to 30, you're going to probably be fine having Distance Spell for some encounters where it matters.
And let me get this clear this up. Your familiar can deliver touch spells. Can they deliver these touch spells at a 30-foot range now?
I do not know how that interaction works. My gut's telling me no, but maybe.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments.
That's true. There are some notable ones I could mention. If you really, really, really are committed to taking Cure Wounds on your Divine Soul Sorcerer, this does extend the range to 30 feet and makes it a sorcery point costed slightly higher healing amount version of Healing Word. Yeah. Okay, that's a thing you could do. Progan Evil is kind of neat with this thing, because you can, like, range put barriers on your allies while they're getting completely obliterated by zombies. I kind of like that. Inflict Wounds is a range high damage option that you suddenly have at your disposal, so that's kind of nifty.
What about Ray of Frost?
Doubling that to 60 feet is more meaningful, but I don't necessarily want to sink sorcery points into that round after round after round,
No, not round after round, but maybe excuse me, in a very specific situation where you need this guy to not reach you this turn.
Yes. That's where I see it being a lot more valuable. That's still, like, not going to be, like, this still ranks low because I don't think that happens most encounters.
No. Yeah.
And I think that you shouldn't expect to use Distance Spell in most encounters. This will make it on my sheet as my 3rd or 4th one pretty often, though.
Okay.
Number 6, I'm surprised it got as low as it did. It's Quicken Spell. I really thought I was going to rank this higher. The reality of this, though...
You made this list, Sam.
It's true, I know. I was expecting to rank this higher.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So I will read Quicken Spell real quick. It says, when you cast a spell that has a casting time of 1 action, you can spend 2 sorcery points to change the casting time to a bonus action for this casting. This is relevant because, as pointed out to me in one of our sorcerer videos, you can't cast a spell of first level or higher using an action, or sorry, using your action if you cast a spell of first level or higher as your bonus action, something to that effect. Let me find the exact rules. So bonus action.
Two
Help D&D
people,
Beyond.
two people actually brought up Quicken Spell in our level 6 sorcerer spells when we're talking about Sunbeam.
Yeah, sure, that's cute. You can
Yeah.
fire off some while firing quickening spell, other
Yeah.
higher level spells. That's neat. I do want to reference this rule specifically as a spell cast. The bonus action is especially swift. When you must use a bonus action on your turn to cast the spell, provided that you haven't already taken a bonus action this turn, you can't cast another spell during the same turn, except for a cantrip with a cast time of 1 action. So if you quicken spell a first level or higher spell, you cannot. If you bonus action any spell, apologies, you cannot cast a first level or higher spell with your action. So you can't just quicken cantrip, cast a third level spell. You have to quicken the third level spell and then cast cantrip if you want to do both in the same round.
Okay.
Which is relevant and why this ranking has fallen so far, I think. Because most of the time what Quicken Spell actually reads is, as you suggested with Sunbeam, I have an effect going, I Quicken Spell a cantrip. Or I Quicken Spell a first level or higher spell. I apologize. It's fine.
Yeah.
I like this most on the Agonizing Blast builds where you want to fire off 10 Eldritch Blasts around. You want to fire off 8 Eldritch Blasts around. You just go, okay, great, Eldritch Blast, Quicken Eldritch Blast. And you just shoot off a volley of these things. They do a truckload of damage. That is like the clear combo to me that this thing has. After that, if you're just playing Sorcerer bread and butter and you're like, I got my fireballs, I got my lightning bolts, I've got my fly, this isn't necessarily going to be that convenient for you to like quicken a firebolt now and then. It is going to up your damage, so you can have it on your sheet. It is an easy place to put sorcery points if you're happy firing a cantrip off every round. You can just be like, quicken a third level spell, cantrip, quicken a fourth level spell, cantrip, then you're out of sorcery points. But it is a valuable option, specifically for cantrip-based builds, that I think is worth considering. If you have 2 levels in Warlock for Agonizing Blast and Eldritch Blast, it is pretty good to go, all right, quicken a Fireball, Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
That's like a very specific build, though. And I think if you aren't planning on using a lot of cantrips, Quicken Spell does get a lot worse. Or if you're not planning to use something like Sunbeam, planning to use one of the investitures, planning on using Vampiric Touch, you can Vampiric Touch attack and quicken a cantrip. Neat.
I'm not
or
going to
quicken
do
a first
that.
level or higher spell. Neat. You do Inflict Wounds plus Vampiric Touch, you're just like draining someone's soul out of them. Number 5, we've got Seeking Spell. So Seeking Spell reads, this is one of the ones I didn't touch called and everything. If you make an attack roll for a spell and a miss, you can spend 2 sorcery points to re-roll the d20 and must use the new roll. You can use Seeking Spell even if you've already used a different metamagic option during the casting of the spell. Thoughts?
Man, that feels expensive.
2 to not miss is really, really good.
Is it?
If you fire a chromatic bolt off and you miss,
Well,
go.
I mean, you don't even necessarily not miss. You mean you might miss again?
You might, but it definitely radically improves your chances of hitting.
Yeah.
Whenever you're spending first level, when you're spending spell slots on attack rolls, you really want them to hit. It's like one of the biggest problems with cast attack range or making attack roll based spells. That's why there are so few of them, I'm guessing, is because they feel terrible when they miss. So whenever you can make them hit, I'm kind of into it. Another point in this thing's favor, this works after you've twinned the spell that's making the attack roll. So if you do something like twin chromatic orbs, you can miss one of them and re-roll it, which gives you this super high power bursty moment that sorcerers are kind of known for, where you're throwing off multiple spells at the same time and then empowering one of them so that it can connect, which I think has some value. I think any kind of effect that can convert misses to hits will be worth it at tables that aren't expending all their resources regularly, and most tables aren't by like 5th, 6th, 7th level. Most of the time, these sorcerers will have 7 sorcery points, chew through a couple spell slots to get some more sorcery points just so they can have big Nova fights, the 3 encounters, or the 2 encounters they get per long rest.
Now, ranged spell attacks can get advantage, right?
Yes. This also will notably include spell attacks made as part of another spell. So this thing I believe works with Crown of Stars, Blade of Disaster, those kinds of stuff.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I feel a lot better about it. If you can get advantage and this gives you super advantage, all right, that's worth 2 sorcery points.
Yeah, it is genuinely a solid little option, I think. I think Seeking Spell won't still make it on a lot of sheets because a lot of sheets aren't going to have attack roll based spells because there aren't many.
Yeah.
And I don't think you need this to pair with your ice knife or anything like that. I think you've got better things to be doing with your ice knives. But I do think that if you are planning on casting Scorching Rays, if you're planning on casting Chromatic Orbs, you can probably put Seeking Spell on your sheet and be happy with it. The fact that you can use other Metamagic makes it really, really efficient to do.
Yes.
Number 4. This one I know is very popular. It is Subtle Spell.
Yes, this is at least twice recommended as the #1 option on this list.
I mean, that's just silly. It's not that powerful. It's
No.
really cute, but it's not that powerful. It is really usable, though. So
Yeah.
this says whenever you cast a spell that you can spend a sorcery point to cast it without any Somatic or verbal components. So you don't need material, you still need to have your orb or your material components on you, your pouch. But this lets you basically forgo verbal and material component or verbal and somatic components whenever you're doing things, allowing a whole new level of discretion.
Discretion, or if your hands are tied or something.
If you're in a silence.
Yeah. What if you're paralyzed?
You still need to have the material component in a hand. If it is in your hand, maybe. I think paralyzation specifically states you can't take actions, so I would guess not. So no.
Okay.
No in the case of things that deny you the ability to take actions.
Okay.
But things that remove your ability to make sounds, you're good to go. I think my favorite element of Subtle Spell is what most people's favorite element of Subtle Spell is just a cool tool to have in your tool belt because it makes the magic casting nature of spells all of a sudden not apparent, which means you can use a lot of effects in ways that no one notices, or at least no one knows the source of. Fireball doesn't you don't have to be pointing dramatically and whispering arcanic words whenever you blow up a room with a fireball. The beetle just appear and explode, and that kind of discretion is useful for some kinds of events, for framing somebody for murder, for doing X, Y, or Z plots. This is a plotting tool. This is something that you can plan to use, get some juice out of to interact with in some unique and funky ways that can be really fun. I think this is a spell that, or an ability that will definitely scale with your willingness to use it and your willingness to come up with ideas for it. There will definitely be players that just don't do that, though. There will definitely be players that put this on their sheet and then don't think to use it like it's a proactive tool that they have to build and work towards and use in that kind of proactive way. As a way to get around silences, that's a niche effect. As a way to get around getting your hands bound, that's not happening all that often. As a tool to engage in subterfuge, okay, that's a little bit more where I'm happy with it.
What about for like mind affecting spells, charm person or something? Does the person still know it was you?
That is a case-by-case basis kind of question. And I don't think the rules are very clear on it in a lot of charms cases. Some charms specifically denote they know who casted this on them. Other spells don't. And in the variance of those and who your DM is, I think the ruling is going to be very wildly different table to table.
Because I wish I had actually read those comments more carefully before we started this video. I want to know, why do people think this is so powerful?
I don't think it's particularly powerful. I think it has opportunities to do cool things.
Yeah.
And the doing cool things tends to equate to powerful, right? If you can frame an NPC for murder because you blew up a room and they were the only spellcaster in it, that is kind of powerful potentially, right? It's just going to vary by situation and all that kind of stuff. So, like, for example, a charmed person denotes specifically that when the spell ends, the creature knows it was charmed by you. So I would say in the case of charmed person, absolutely they know you are the one who charmed them.
Yeah, that's right there in the description.
In other cases, I don't know if that is the case. So.
All right. Move on.
Yeah, let's spell. It finds its way as my third or fourth Metamagic pretty regularly. Number 3 is Empowered Spell. I think this is just really, it's so easy to use. Empowered Spell is one of the most simple and digestible, and you stick it on every Timmy's character sheet and they'll have fun blowing things up with bigger numbers. So it says, when you roll damage for a spell, you can spend a sorcery point to re-roll a number of damage dice up to your charisma modifier, minimum of 1. You must use the new rolls. You can use Empowered Spell even if you've already used a different Metamagic option during the casting of the spell, which boy howdy means you can use this while twinning stuff, which is pretty cool. And it's only 1. 1 is real cheap. Thoughts?
Yeah, 1 is cheap. Well, I mean, if you've got a upcast fireball, that's a lot of anything. If you've got a larger number of small dice, well, no, it still only goes up to your charisma modifier, but yeah, you can easily get that with a fireball.
Yeah, and so there was a Redditor that I found the data from. The gist of the breakdown of the analytics that they ran was that it adds around a 22% damage bump to your spells, which is a big chunk for a single sorcery point, right? That's very much so generalizing. I have a link on the piece that links to the Reddit post that goes through all the statistics of it. But like it is relevant that you can get a big damage buff out of this that's worth using. More so, like most of the time, your charisma modifier will be higher than the amount of dice you want to reroll. So like you'll want to see the
That's
threes
true,
and
yeah.
under, and you'll see the 4s and above in the case of Fireball, and you'll be like, okay, all the threes and under I reroll. And as long as you follow that general guidance, you're going to be upping your damage on average more often than not. So like it is just a handy thing to stick on to anything you want to do a lot of damage with.
Yeah, 1 point. Well worth it.
Super cheap. Every single sorcerer is going to be doing area effect damage.
Yeah.
Number 2, the second to last, is Heightened Spell. Heightened Spell is really important for specific sorcerers. Those are sorcerers that like Saber dice. Heightened Spell says, when you cast a spell that forces a creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects, you can spend 3 sorcery points to give one target of the spell disadvantage on the saving throw. This thing, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
That seems pricey. Let me reread it. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, when you're casting a save or die, you really want it to land.
You need it to land. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever you're casting a Disintegrate, Disintegrate's a save. Whenever you're casting a Polymorph, when you're casting a Banishment, you need that thing to land.
Yeah.
Heightened Spell lets it land. Now, notably, you can't use this alongside other metamagics like Empowered Spell. If you can't twin something and have one of them be heightened, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. But against one big villain in particular, this thing's debilitating. This thing says, no, your likelihood of passing just tanks because I have a guaranteed way to give you disadvantage on the save when I cast this spell. Your odds of hits for Saber dice radically goes up whenever you pair it with Heightened Spell. This will matter a lot more in the upper tiers, so this is a really comfortable third meta badge to stick on your sheet. But it is going to be powerful once you have the sorcery points to burn with it, where you'll go, okay, great. 6 of my 11 sorcery points are going to be heightening 2 important spells. The rest of the time, I'm just going to spend cheap things twinning and empowering. That seems like a great spot to be.
Yeah. Speaking of twinning, like, all right, it makes number 1 on your list, which surprised me because if I was making this list, it would have made number 1 on mine, and I would expect you to say, "Oh, Bob, you poor naive soul." But no, it's twin spell.
It's free and
amazing.
nuts.
Yeah.
It's one of the most busted abilities in this game. It lets you trade sorcery points for another instantaneous free cast of a spell. The actual words of it are important. It is the most complicated. So it says whenever you cast a spell that targets only one creature and doesn't have a range of self, you can spend a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level to target a second creature within range with the same spell level. You okay?
I don't know. Something just exploded outside.
Exploded?
I don't know. It was either a gunshot or I don't know what the hell that was.
Spooky.
Yeah. Well,
Anyway,
go on.
yeah. So you have to spend sorcery points equal to the spell's level, one of its cantrip. To be eligible, a spell must be incapable of targeting more than one creature at the spell's current level. So if it can target more things in upper levels, that's fine as long as it currently doesn't target more things right now. The examples it gives are Magic Missile and Scorching Ray not being eligible, but Ray of Frost and Chromatic Orb being eligible.
Yes.
Finding exactly what spells work with this is tricky. Eldritch Blast, for example, works at up until 5th level, and then it stops working with this because you can twin one Eldritch Blast, you can't twin multiples.
Right.
But it is so, like, all of the powerful spells we talked about with Heightened Spell, Hideous Laughter, Banishment, Polymorph, twinning those is gross. Twinning, you're spending 4 sorcery points for an instantaneous second free action that's casting another powerful spell. Meanwhile, you're able to concentrate on both those spells simultaneously. That's insanely powerful. It's an extra concentration. It's an extra spell. It's happening at a really quick pace. This is the most busted meta magic. It isn't particularly close. I highly recommend, if you haven't played around with Twin Spell, play around with Twin Spell. This thing is busted.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's and you do get quite a few spells to use. It's not like you're going to be starved for options.
No. Shout out to Ice Knife. Yes, it does in fact work with this. It's been commented by the designers. They're like, yep, Ice Knife makes an attack roll against one target. So what happens with Ice Knife specifically is you make an attack roll against target. If it hits the target, they take bonus damage, then it explodes regardless, doing AoE damage around them. So when you twin this, you pick 2 creatures that are within 5 feet of each other, make an attack against each of them, and then the explosions hit both. That's really, really good for a first level spell and
Yes.
1 sorcery point.
Let's see. How up to what level do applicable spells go for Twin Spell?
Up to 9th level.
Up all the way up?
I'm pretty sure
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if there are any 9th level spells off the top of my head that you can twin, but most spell levels in the game have the ability to be cast on a target. And because sorcerers can get Divine Soul and get all of Cleric's list as well as all of Sorcerer's list,
All right, because
you
there's the
will
power
have
words.
spells.
Yeah, I mean, not that you want to use the power words, but yeah, power words go up to level 9. Yeah.
Yep. The other thing is, like, we haven't mentioned, you can twin buffs with this, so you can twin protection from evil and good, you can twin heroisms, you can twin all kinds of better buff effects like haste and good buffs like
Twin
fly.
haste would be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, you twin haste on your barbarian and your fighter, and then they just go and massacre some stuff while you hide in a corner and pray not to lose concentration.
Yep.
It's really cool. Now, it's debilitating if you lose concentration, but that's just the fickleness of haste.
Sure.
There are a lot of really cool things you can do with Twin Spell. I do think it deserves the #1 slot, and I think, again, it's by a pretty substantial margin. All things considered, though, Bob, do you think any of these are like completely and utterly unusable? Would you never take any of these?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
I stand by that from the very beginning with Transmuted Spell. It's yeah, perhaps deserving of the 10th spot, but a far cry from unusable.
Yeah. I also will say, like, my middle 3 to 7, they're really close. Like, I don't think 4 to 7 are really close, I think. There really is a lot of different power gauges to look at in those things. Like, Quicken Spell is obviously going to be obnoxiously powerful in some character sheets and just stone useless on others. Whereas something like Distance Spell is going to be more regularly usable on a lot of character sheets, just it's not going to be nearly as powerful in any of those instances. Metamagic is going to need to be shaped to your character. It's going to be shaped to what you want your character to do, and it's nice that this list kind of gives you at least a decent variety of stuff to do in that regard. You can make a lot of different kinds of sorcery with these things. I think it's neat.
Me too. All right. Well, that was our Metamagic ranking video. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. Let us know what you think in the comments. I know you're going to have some opinions. We'd love to hear them. Until next time, like, subscribe, and I'm going to go see what the hell's going on outside my house. Goodbye.